Hello, everyone. You're listening to Truth Cat Radio at truthcatradio.com. The current time is 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's East Coast, USA. Although I myself am broadcasting from Chicago in U.S. My name is Richard Kary, and this is Beyond the Matrix. Tonight, we're very happy to have Ruuben Kaalep with us. We're very excited to hear what he has to share with us this evening. I did just want to take a moment, though, first to, while thanking all of you for listening, remind you all that we are completely listener-supported. We're not accepting any corporate advertising, and we are not monetizing. All of our archives are free. So if you can, please support our station. We have a support page on our station website, URL www.truthcatradio.com. And PayPal is accepted. Any little bit helps. So please, donate whatever you can. In the world of the independent media, no donation is too small. If you have some small amount after your bills for the month, now and again, once in a while, a lot of times that can really help, us, those little extra contributions to make sure everything's covered for the expenses here. We have a lot of great hosts and shows, a lot of great guests with topics that we want to keep bringing to you. So I do want to remind you that you're the reason why we're able to do this. Oh, and please, we use Facebook for most all of our promotion with a lot of our guests and shows. Please join our Facebook group and like our pages for Truth Cat Radio, Truth Cat and Beyond the Matrix, and of course our group Truth Cats. A lot of people like sharing a lot of great information there. And if someone would like to call in tonight, ask any questions or say hello to Ruuben, call-in number for you will be 714-598-3125. That number again, 714-598-3125. Or if you want to connect on Skype, it would be sending a message to our station manager with a contact request. That's Stephen D. Kelly, STEVEN D Kelley on Skype. And if you send him a contact request and say you'd like to join the show, he can connect you that way as well. And if we do connect, just don't say anything in the call-in queue, and I'll verbally invite you to speak. And please help out with whatever you can to support the station. Now then, as I said, tonight we have Ruuben Kaalep joining us, and Ruuben is the leader of the Estonian youth movement, Blue Awakening. He has been a presenter at many speaking events, including the...
Hey, hang on just a second, Richard. Hold on just a second. All right, okay. Listen, all right, you guys listening, we're getting attacked right now. We just lost the server, so if you lose the sound, you have to reset your page. Okay, so if this is what happens when we get attacked. Another computer bumps into our server and knocks us off. And anyway, that's what's going on right now with TruthCat. So if that happens while you're listening, all you have to do is reload the page, and you'll be able to hear it correctly. Okay, and don't type while you're not muted. Okay, thank you. Bye. Continue.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, no, I'm noticing we're getting attacked quite a bit recently here. And certainly with these sort of topics that go against the grain of what those in power would like. But no, just to repeat, we have tonight Ruuben Kaalep joining us. And Ruuben is the leader of the Estonian youth movement, Blue Awakening. He has been a presenter at many speaking events, including the 2017 Identitarian Ideas conference in Stockholm. And hello, Ruuben, are you still with us?
Hello, and thanks for having me on. Thanks for the nice introduction.
Oh, yes, certainly, and yes, thank you very much for coming and arranging to be here today. Where you are in Estonia, what hour is it right now?
It's 3 a.m. actually.
Okay, yes, I thought it was about that. Well, so yes, I do appreciate your making arrangements to be with us live on TruthCat Radio and of course being able to speak to an audience that perhaps is not able to hear a lot of this information.
Yes, this is a great opportunity for that, I think.
Yes, certainly.
Truth has to come out some ways, and more and more people are doing that in the West, as you and many people from the alt-right and different movements, national movements all around the Western world. People are finding out about their identity, how nationality and ethnicity is something more important for us than the mainstream media would tell us. And this is, I think, a sign of some kind of rising idea in the West.
Yes, well, I know you work with the political organization Sinine Äratus. I'm probably
yes,
pronouncing
the
it.
Blue Awakening. This is the youth movement of the Nationalist Party in Estonia, the Conservative People's Party. Our youth movement and the party have both been active since 2012, so it's been 5 years for now. Our party has already 7 seats in the parliament out of 101, and our support among the population is rising, especially in connection with the terrorist attacks in Western Europe, because our party is the only political force in Estonia who has taken a strong stand against mass immigration, against all kinds of leftist ideologies that are ruling the West. And a lot of people here in the eastern part of Europe see what is happening in the West, and they don't want it to come to our country. So this is kind of big sign for our party's rise, just like Trump's election in America and Brexit last year.
Yes, no, the people are certainly making themselves heard. Even if they attempt to rig the elections and the voting, they can't stop an overwhelming landslide, basically. And the people's opinions are not being hidden in these cases lately. It really is hopeful. Now, I did mention a little based on some information I heard actually Ramsey Paul mentioning, like when I was describing the show, and he was just describing how much this parade has grown in just a short amount of time.
Yes, the Torchlight March. We are celebrating with our movement the Estonian Independence Day, our national holiday, in the February of every year with a huge Torchlight March. We began it in 2014, so this year it was the 4th time we organized this, and in our first march there were 200 people maybe. This time there were 3,000, so it's growing along the lines that all the nationalist movements in Europe are rising.
And for some people who don't understand too well some of these terms. Well, I mean, I mentioned the conference in Stockholm. You had spoken at Identitarian.
Right.
Well, perhaps you could explain for people out there who don't really understand this term.
Yes. Well, identitarianism is a kind of term for European identity politics. Well, in America, you have all kinds of leftist identity politics, feminism, the whole black rights movement, and so on. And this is simply something that tends to happen in a multicultural society, because in a multicultural society, you can't really blend in everyone. There will be identities based on people's roots, people's culture, people's ancestry, and I think, well, the left has been using these kinds of non-white identity politics against the Europeans, and the mass immigration in Western Europe is just another sign of that. So the only thing that would work against this, basically to find again our roots as Europeans, is our own way, or our own kind of identity politics. And the common word for that is also nationalism, but identitarianism kind of takes the European perspective into view. It is based on the idea that there are different layers of identity. There is local identity, national identity, but also the European identity, because, well, no matter if you look at Europe or America, we are still pretty similar people compared to the rest of the world. We have similar cultures, we have similar roots in European history. And if we want to find again our national identities, our national roots, then we also need that sense of European identity. Something that would connect all these different nations of Europe, Estonians, Finns, Germans, Polish, English, and so on. Because in this current situation, Europe is facing basically an invasion of non-Europeans and the whole rest of the world into our countries. So this is a whole European problem, and it can only be resolved by a European solution.
Yes, I know a lot of the corporate media tries to paint just a very glorious picture of all of this immigration, multiculturalism, and diversity. They hide any sort of problems or crime related to these immigrant populations, and well, they try to keep any positive descriptions of nationalism hidden. The corporate media doesn't really seem to allow too much of this out. That's why it was very surprising when Trump won by such a large margin. It seems though in America, people were only concerned with a couple of points, related to, say, the jobs and immigration here, but I don't think a lot of them consider a lot of the other concerns that the alt-right can have in European nations. I think people have given it a lot more thought there. The politics and the philosophies that brings to mind.
That's right. Well, first because America historically has lost their roots to their countries of origin, where most of Americans come from. America has kind of blended together all these different European identities, and in that sense, it is still a nation that is in process of becoming something. In Europe, it is quite different because we have nations with very ancient roots in history. For example, Estonians have been living on this land for 12,000 years, since the end of the Ice Age. And this kind of builds a connection to your country, to your land, to your people. And this is something that in which Europe is unique compared to America. And on the other hand, this immigration problem is just now, in a way, awakening this European spirit. Because in Western Europe, there are in like bigger cities like Paris or London, almost majority of people who live there are not ethnically French or English or so on. They're immigrants, and this creates a situation where you get this sense of us versus them, which is historically the root of most conflicts in history. But this also lets you, arrive at this point where you start again giving meaning to your own identity. Because if you have to face something other cultures, other people, then it eventually creates a point where you start valuing your own. I think this is what is happening.
I think that European people in America may eventually get to that point, but it will be happening much more in slow motion. All of the stages to arrive at these conclusions and these ways of thinking. But I can see a lot of this globalism and a lot of these motivations of the EU as well, intending to eradicate European nations from Europe, where the populations of the future will just be completely dissolved through just blending, and then that I think what makes me want to bring up the term. I notice you choose to use ethnofuturist.
Right.
So I don't know. Perhaps you could introduce our listeners to this.
Well, the idea of ethnofuturism is connecting your roots to your wings, which means basically, well, if we look at European history philosophically, then, well, since Nietzsche, there has been this idea that the social change that comes with the history does not certainly mean that things get better. Because, well, this globalist ideology and liberal ideology is based on the idea that everything new is inherently better than the old. But the result has been, as we see, that people are losing their connection to the roots. People are losing kind of social frameworks of community. And the end result of all that is nihilism, which means that nothing really matters anymore. And in that sense, we have to look to the past and see how people lived in the past when they had their identity, when they had their national feelings, when there was pride and duty and all that really creates civilization. But we must not start seeing the past as something that we have to recreate here, because well, in a lot of ways we can't really reverse all this damage that has been done, even since the French Revolution, when the liberal ideology came to power in Europe. And thus we also, in addition to the past, we have to have an idea of the future for our nations and our civilization. And Oswald Spengler, the German philosopher in the 1920s, had this vision of civilizational cycles, that the world's history is built of different cycles that last for 1,000 to 2,000 years, and the cultures spring and die like plants. Maybe they have their spring and summer and autumn, and the current European civilizational cycle that began in the Roman era is now reaching its natural endpoint, which means basically that if we want our peoples to live on in Europe, we have to create a new European civilization. We have to find this youthful energy in us that was there maybe in the Viking Age, in the early Middle Ages, when people built this civilization. And we have to do that again, because the history goes in cycles. And we are at that point where, yes, in some way, everything seems lost. We have lost our identity. We have become kind of ruthless consumers in the global market. But this also isn't the end point of history. The things will go on ever since from this point. And it is up to us what the new Europe will look like in 100, 200 years.
So as the Greek and Roman society and what it has established has reached its climax and is burning out here, exhausting itself. Yes, it is very interesting now. Yeah, we see a strong revival from the Nordic peoples, who are able to finally have more of a chance to recapture much of their heritage, and these are the people who were referred to as barbarians at one time. Isn't that right?
Right. Well, Europe is kind of result of two different routes, maybe, or two different points of origin. One of them is the southern civilized Greco-Roman world, and the other point of origin for Europe is the northern barbaric energy that and Europe as we know it right now is like the result of these both energies coming together. And well, in this latest civilizational cycle, since the Middle Ages, since the Roman time, the southern part has dominated. So, in a way, it's my idea that maybe Europe needs more of this northern barbaric spirit now. Maybe not so civilized, not so refined, but something deeply connected to the nature, deeply connected to mysticism and myths of our northern ancestors. And I think creating this balance is also important, both geopolitically but also ideologically.
Certainly. Well, I mean, a lot of time has passed. Nonetheless, the victors write the history books. So, of course, the references to barbarians was just something created by those of these other civilizations to the south.
Of course.
But yeah, no, I mean, perhaps the Nordic people are exactly what all Europeans need to rejuvenate their spirit. I really find that concept of the cycles to different ethnic peoples to be very fresh, a very fresh perspective. Especially, I mean, from my perspective as someone who's living in America as a European. It can be even more difficult as far as the political correct crowd, here for there to be any any popular potential for just the appreciation or rejuvenation of European culture. I mean, it's almost seen as a negative thing. For other ethnicities here, it is considered okay, for any of them to retain their heritage, their culture, and just their people, no matter what land they are in. Not just at their homeland, but I mean, as far as the European people here in America, it gets termed, of course, to be seen as racist, and I know we're getting a lot of this in Europe too. I hear that there's a lot of shame toward European people to be able to to retain their people and culture the same way as any other ethnicity.
Yes, but this is just the dying leftist ideology trying to use all their means that they have to block this new rising youthful power. I think, well, this whole leftist ideology is built on this idea that everything that they do makes the world better, and still they are like stuck in this view that the world gets only better through what the Europeans have to offer to the world, because all their ideological points like human rights and global democracy and so on mean forcing the European concepts on the whole world. But this is doomed to fail, because their whole ideology denies the difference of cultures, the variety of different worldviews, and this true diversity that we have in the world, and that we should protect this fact that we have so many different ethnicities and peoples, which is something that we should appreciate as Europeans. The world gets its beauty and meaning also thanks to our cultures and our peoples.
And this this double standard, this hypocrisy that comes from the left and is now kind of like the middle for most people. All the ideologies of the left have somehow become the middle, in the propaganda of the political correct media, both in America and Europe. It's just
Right.
fascinating.
Well, since the French Revolution, basically the Overton window has always been moving to the left direction. And what is now, well, the mainstream right, mainstream conservatism in the West is just leftism that is lagging behind in time for 50 years or less.
Well, you can only deny the differences of various cultures when you crunch them together for so long before the problems cannot be hidden anymore. I think that's what the point we're finally getting to. It's very curious because we're seeing the entire EU breaking apart right now, and there were other factors people weren't happy about, like trade deals and this and that, and just the wealth of the countries getting shifted unfairly. But the primary thing has been the immigration, that has really pushed everyone to the breaking point.
Right, the underlying factor in this coming breakup of the EU is nationalism, definitely.
Yes, and even though Trump, all of his current policies so far, I don't know, they seem to, internationally still be getting influenced by people who want war. I don't know. So far, I haven't been too impressed with that, but what he has been elected for and what the people have shown by electing him, I think, represents, this same sort of spirit, that we are seeing in Europe.
Right, and I think this is fundamentally more important than what Trump will do as president. This
Yes.
This idea of the silent majority of, or the well, he was voted by the mostly white Americans who kind of still have this sense that that there's something terribly wrong with mass migration and globalism and so on, and this is again part of this reawakening national spirit, even in America. I think this is fundamentally more important than the person himself, these ideas that he represents.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes, what the people have shown with this election is far more significant than us judging what he does in office and all of the factors any person in that position would be up against all around him. That is not as important in the great spectrum in the great spectrum. We want to see what the people are actually saying, and I think this does that. When you mention nationalism, it makes me think of comparisons I've heard a lot discussed by some recently. Well, the differences between patriotism and nationalism. I mean, I think these are very subtle but very important points, and I don't think a lot of people have considered these sort of things.
Right, because nationalism is something inherently deeper and more spiritual than simple patriotism, which is patriotism is simply loyalty to your government and your state. But nationalism kind of looks behind what the state and the government should represent. They should represent people and the traditions and ultimately the ancestors who built this country. And nationalism also, in a way, means creating this link between ancestors and descendants. There is always someone who has to keep the fire alive until the descendants come and take it over. And this is maybe also the hard point where we are right now, because there was the previous civilizational cycle. We hope there will be a next one, but someone has to pass on the message from one cycle to another.
It's like a nation's people could be going through almost an ice age, that they're trying to survive, to get back to another golden age.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, I mean, both for European nations of various origin, or also the European Americans. This is certainly seeming like one of those times. I mean, it seems like much of the world is very much pitted against us retaining any sort of cohesion, in any sense of the word.
Yes, I agree. Well,
but I mean, it is more difficult here. I mean, I find it interesting, just the concepts that I know you've been speaking about regarding, just the idea of an ethno state, and being able to, to accept that at the time there can be a need for that in the coming eras. I mean, in America, even you've suggested this sort of thing, not just in Europe. I mean, different peoples of different ethnicities being able to just have a a certain region, that they can call their own. I mean, we have, just a lot of people trying to retain their heritage, but we have a lot of, cultural problems, even crime, and just a lot of harm that can come from just cultures not being defined, right?
Right. I think that's also one of the differences between Europe and America, because in America, I've discovered that this idea of ethno-state is much harder to conceive for the people, because there isn't a real tradition of ethnic communities, right? In Europe, at least in the eastern part of Europe, it's much more natural, because here there isn't really so big difference between the state and the nation, at least historically. This has always been one thing, this Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Ukraine, our nations have always fought for our independence and freedom from other nations. And that's a tradition of an ethno-state. That's something that is deeply inside European history. And it's going to be hard for the leftists to, delete that part of our history. I think they eventually won't succeed in that.
As well, I mean, we see the preservation of nations, nation states and cultures elsewhere on the planet, of non-Europeans, without question. We aren't seeing any of this immigration there. Well, for one thing, a lot of the countries simply would not allow the immigration. They see how it does nothing to help their country, and would only be just adding more to try to use up the resources of whatever they have, and these are people who have no rights to thing, and that people do not have as close of ties to. I mean, they just see the logic of it, but somehow all of the European nations, and America as well, because I see that as separate, like we were discussing, seem to, I don't know, to buy into this. It's like there's sort of a guilt and a shaming that is done on a psychological level that you don't see with Asian countries, or that you don't see with some of these just other nations around the globe in general.
Right. The Asian countries generally have very few immigration, because they simply don't allow masses of people from totally different parts of the world to come into their country, because there's nothing rational about that. It's only happening in Europe. You're right about that.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people here in the in America, and I know a lot in Western Europe too. I mean, we're still bombarded with documentaries and things, cable stations talking about history and such. We're bombarded, of course, with World War II propaganda, for example, still, and just everything negative you could imagine, related to nationalism. Using that, the Asian cultures, though, they appreciate all this nationalism, and we don't, in the current era, we don't shame them in the same way about retaining any of that or excluding immigration. It's definitely a double standard, with this political correctness and globalism.
Absolutely. I think the reason for that is the left has somehow managed to weaponize empathy. That is, that's something so deeply inside European psychology. Europeans are much more open to cooperation and traits like that, because these are psychological traits that evolved during the Ice Age. And the left is now using these traits against Europeans because, this is also a sign of this cultural decline and reaching that low point between the cycles, where all that is positive in our culture and in our civilization is somehow turning against us.
And we have to somehow retain our people, our culture, through this dark, cold time. If we are to survive, and yes, that's why I can very much appreciate your using the ethnofuturist term, because you have to look at what this is going to do. We look at each of these countries and the numbers of immigrants that are coming in, and increasing, for projections for following years now. And just the EU's insistence on all of this, all of the countries already having trouble getting rid of any that they're finding were more than they could handle, or are committing crimes. Can't send them back. Yes. Even what is the future? So I mean, this is very important to people. People have to realize that these nations' entire futures are at stake here.
I think crimes and terrorism aren't even the biggest problems that immigration is creating in Europe. The biggest problem is that if it continues at the same rate, then Europeans in many Western European countries will become a minority within this century. And this is close to cultural extinction. This is the biggest problem that we are facing in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, people come to these countries or visit these countries because of the unique European culture that each of them has developed over time, and yes, these are all going to be erased in what you say about a century. So in like a couple generations time at most.
Yes, for example, Swedes will be a minority in Sweden by the 2050s. And I think, yeah, similar projects and projections are there for England and France and Belgium.
So that's only about 30, 35 years. It's about one, I think they'd call that one generation, would they? Or would that be two?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, one. So, I mean, yeah, that could be, like, say I'm 40 now. I mean, so yeah, I could see this in my lifetime, really. Most of these European nations dissolve if people don't do more to retain their nations, their culture.
That's why I think it's so important geopolitically that the eastern part of the European Union is right now rejecting in large part mass immigration. Hungary and Poland are closing the borders for the migrants, and this is kind of a reaction against all this that is happening in the West. And if there is hope for the Europe and maybe for the Europeans worldwide, then it's most likely going to be from this eastern part of Europe.
It was about three to 4 years ago that I really started hearing, a lot of accounts of this immigration in Europe. I was really surprised by the numbers and just the amount into these countries so far away from the origin of a lot of these people. I mean, it just seems so deliberate. I mean, you have these people who are in the Middle East or in Northern Africa, and they're winding up in the northmost. For people who aren't aware, I mean, Estonia is just about as north as you can get for Europe, right? Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you're across the sea from Sweden to the east of them. What is that? The Baltic Sea, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it just seems so deliberate, when this huge amount of immigration over so many miles, is done into each of these countries. It just seems like they want to tax the native populations to, just stop their threat to the global system.
Exactly, and this was, I believe, also the idea behind a year ago when the European Commission announced this migrant quotas for all the member states of the EU, which meant that since now it has been only the western part of Europe that is suffering under immigration. But the EU now created a plan that migrants must be shared by all the EU countries. And I think the idea behind that was that the same thing must happen all over Europe. They don't want to leave any white parts on the map.
Now, when you say Western Europe, well, would the Nordic countries all be considered part of Eastern Europe? Would that be accurate?
I would consider Sweden as Western Europe because
okay.
large it's divided by the former Soviet sphere of influence and the Western Europe.
All right. But in general, just the amount of immigrants in the quotas can just increase per year. I mean, there's no there's no keeping, this organization in check. The EU has autonomy, to just write whatever it wants for law. I did hear a recent account. I think Poland, they're trying to increase the amount for next year, and Poland is trying to refuse. So they're trying to say,
Poland said no to the EU. Well, the thing is that actually it matters a lot who's in power in a specific country, because if you have a nationalist government, then there's very few that the EU can do, because the EU doesn't really have a mechanism to force the countries to do their bidding. In Estonia, unfortunately, we have a liberal government, and they accepted the quotas, which were like something around 500 migrants as a start. But it will definitely be more with each year. So it's a question who is in power, and if they are kind of have this slavish mentality before the EU or not.
I see.
In the case of Poland and Hungary, they are standing for their national interest and their national values. So it's possible to do that, but it kind of takes balls.
Yes, certainly. Here, if you could just mute your microphone for about 5 minutes. We're just going to do a little station break before the second hour. All right, thank you. Well, everyone, you are listening to Beyond the Matrix with Richard Kary, and tonight we're speaking with Ruuben Kaalep. He's going to continue with us for hour number 2 here.
I'm ready.
Okay. All right, Stephen.
All right, yeah, as Richard was saying, in about 1 hour approximately, we will start the next show, which of course is the Stephen E. Kelly Show. And tonight I'm going to be going to town on the Getty. Going to have a showdown with the Getty and the FBI and all those fun agencies. Hope you'll stay tuned in. Tomorrow we've got 6 p.m. Eastern. We've got, actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, 6 p.m. Eastern. We got Greg Downey with his show, which is called Attracting Miracles. And then after that, we've got a debut, which is The Invisible Gardener with Andy Lopez. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday. Okay. And we come back on Monday. We're going to have Shima Moore at 8 p.m. with Metaphysics and More. At 10 p.m. is Joan Hangarter with Angel Essence. Tuesday at 6 p.m. starts with Happy Mind, Happy Life with Sheila Willis. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern, and 8 p.m. Eastern is Daryl Nichols with the Daryl Show. And 10 p.m. is Dave Robbins with Mystic Freedom. Then we come back on Wednesday. It's 8 p.m. Eastern with Mars Madness and Mars Theron. And after Mars at 10 p.m. Eastern is Freedom of Choice with Terry Joyce. And of course, when we come back on Thursday, we're going to start our day with Donbass Hour, broadcast from Donetsk, your new favorite show from the war zone, with David Simpson, and of course Graham comes after that, and then Richard, and then myself. If you're listening right now, we would like to ask you to consider making a donation. I know you're the only ones that we ask, but we have to ask somebody. So please think about putting something in that PayPal to help us pay our bills and stay above this constant attack that we're having. And again, I want to remind you, if you're having choppy audio, reload, refresh your page, and that's all you can do. We've only had 28 minutes of continuous streaming as of right now since the last interruption, so all I can say is refresh your page as soon as they start screwing with it. It's not us, it's them. Help us out on Facebook, share our ads, join our Facebook page, join all our Facebook pages and share all our ads and help us out. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, which many of you do, please give a thumbs up and a good comment, please, and share it. share it on your Facebook page, okay? If it's good enough for you to watch, it's good enough for you to share with your friends. Think about that. Everything you spend time actually listening to and watching on Facebook, you should be sharing with your friends. Anything worth your time is worth sharing. So help us out. Grace, quiet. And help us gain some listenership and help us work so hard to get this message out to everybody. And stay tuned again in 1 hour of Stephen D. Kelly Show. This is TruthCat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. You're listening to Beyond the Matrix with Richard Kary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome back, everyone. And yes, we are speaking tonight with Ruuben Kaalep, and he is the leader of the Estonian youth movement, Blue Awakening. Ruuben, hi. I'm sorry we don't have too much of a break to offer. I hope you were able to, do whatever you needed to do to refresh there. I before the break was discussing with you Poland, and you also mentioned Hungary, and that they are resisting this immigration, and perhaps just if enough countries could, take their example, and just be okay with breaking away from the EU. It could just go a long way to stopping a lot of this control over countries and their wealth and freedom, basically. I mean, I would have to say that it really seems like that's I don't know, just a big issue. It's like the stock market, this EU. It's all based on how much faith you have in investing in it, and that has to maintain confidence. If too many people say it's not worth it being in the EU, then it's going to be worthless, and it knows it. It completely is just a cult, really.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, I believe that leaving the EU doesn't simply do the work, because I think, as we're going to see in Britain's example, they're still going to have these problems with migration. The migration will continue, and the British people are still getting closer to becoming minority in their country. So what really has to be done is a reawakening of national spirit in all European countries. And this is actually the idea among many Eastern European nationalists, that we have to be a political bloc of nation states in the eastern part of the EU. These are the countries that have retained much more national values and that are much more healthier than the Western countries. So it would be a geopolitical bloc that consists of Poland, Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia, Baltic states, Ukraine, and so on, which would stand against the Western cultural influence, and also against Russian imperialism, which isn't an ally of European nationalism, although many Western nationalists mistakenly think so.
Really? Could you just explain that more? Because I mean, it seems like it's a good example, at least. A lot of the self-sustaining policies that Putin currently has with Russia, like a lot of their, growing of their own food and manufacturing of their own products. A lot of these sort of things could be a good model for any nation, and that he has brought some sort of sense of nationalism, perhaps back to Russian people, a positive.
So and so, because well, from a pure European perspective, there isn't so much difference between America and Russia. Both are historically imperialistic powers built by Europeans who kind of crossed the borders of Europe into the West and the East. And they have built their own empires that don't really have that big connection to European identity anymore. Russia, in fact, has a lot of similar problems to America. Russia has also a growing Muslim population, which is somewhere between 20 and 30%. And the Russian government really isn't also doing anything to stop this migration into Russia. There are anti-government nationalists in Russia who are imprisoned and persecuted by the government. Also, what is interesting is there are many small nations living in Russia who are related to Estonians and Finns, the Finno-Ugric people. And the Russian policy has always been to basically Russianize them, make them Russians. These Finno-Ugric people in Russia aren't allowed to use their own language in their schools, and like preserving their heritage and their culture is very difficult in Russia. And all the support that Russia is giving to some Western European nationalists is only tactical from the Russian perspective, because Russia right now don't really have an ideology. They only have geopolitics, the idea that they have to bring back the strength of their empire. And so they are supporting both right-wing nationalists in Europe, but also the far left. For example, the Greek leftist party is supported by Russia in the same way as the French nationalists, for example. So it's a strategy to weaken their competitors in the global geopolitical arena.
Okay, I see. And they also then, you're saying, have too much centralized power. A lot of these regions or so-called provinces of portions of Russia deserve to be independent nation states of their own.
Right.
Okay. And yeah, they're trying, as you say, they're trying to Russianize too many areas, kind of similar to America, still trying to colonize, right? And more conquest. Well, and no, it's just very, very interesting, actually, to understand. I think a lot of people out there are appreciating your perspectives. That in the West here, we don't have as clear an idea, a lot of these distinctions, because yeah, I mean, on the face of it, we just see some things about Russia that are in a lot of other people's interests, who support nationalism, things such as being against globalism, and things related to that, like trade restrictions and the GMOs and a lot of these things that are harmful to the people. Like it seems like at least, but beyond that,
the thing is, the enemy of your enemy isn't necessarily your friend.
Certainly. No, well, this is very enlightening, actually. I mean, just the differences that you're able to explain to us, between both Eastern and Western Europe and also America, but also these perspectives on Russia are that we wouldn't really, be able to get from most people. I don't know if you I don't know, had somewhere else you wanted to go with this. I mean, well, you mentioned geopolitical. So I mean, regarding Putin, you don't agree with, you're not impressed with him too much, but at least geopolitically, I don't know. What would you have to say about, your impression of him?
Well, I'm totally on the side in the Ukrainian conflict because, the situation in Ukraine is quite complicated, but it began as a revolution organized by nationalists against their pro-Russian government. This revolution was basically hijacked by pro-EU liberals. The liberals are in power in Ukraine right now. The nationalists mostly are fighting in the front lines. So the idea of Ukrainian nationalists is that first they're gonna restore the borders of their country, and then they're gonna march on the capital and replace the government by a nationalist one. I don't know if that's going to work out, but I surely hope so. So
and you mentioned
Russia in that sense is just trying to recreate the influence that they had during the Soviet time.
Okay, so yeah, they're global.
Driving. Yeah, this inferiority complex is driving much of Russian politics because they have this idea that once they had a strong empire and now they are much well. But yeah, there's like no. It's not simply black and white, of course, because in Syria, for example, Russia is definitely on the right side. But for tactical reasons, and it's a huge mistake of the West that they picked the wrong side in Syria and allowed Russia to grow the region.
I'm sorry. Your sound was cutting out a little. I think our server is being attacked a little bit. We've been having a lot of issues tonight, but I don't know. Could you repeat that last part?
Yes, I was talking about the Syrian war, where Russia is on the right side.
That's him, not us. That wasn't him. We've had 43 minutes of continuous stream, so yeah, that was his.
Oh, okay.
Then I'm sorry about that.
Well, yeah, but the last part about Russia. I mean, they're on the right side.
But this is the mistake that the West has been doing. The West picked the wrong side in Libya. The West picked the wrong side in Syria, and that allowed Russia to grow their geopolitical influence by getting an ally in the Middle East.
And in Ukraine as well, though, I mean, it's clear that those people, wanted to be with Russia.
You mean the Ukrainian people?
Yes.
Not really, because, Ukraine has a big Russian population that is mainly concentrated in the eastern part of Ukraine. And yes, of course, a lot of Russians in Ukraine wanted to be with Russia, but Ukrainian nationalists who are representing the Western and the majority of Ukraine.
I know that a lot of those were like organizations, that were behind just the origin of a lot of those groups. So I know George Soros had been investing a lot of time and people in that region, to stir up a lot of opposition. But I mean, you described a something that wasn't natural, an uprising that wasn't natural, and of the people.
Well,
right?
It was hijacked, but it began as a nationalist protest against the government, which was a genuine thing. It was hijacked by Soros and all those Western organizations because they saw that this revolution could be successful, and in that case they wanted to be in control, which they managed.
In that sense, it reminds me of the French Revolution that you spoke of earlier, because I mean, isn't that what it really was? Not quite as genuinely a revolt of the people, the way we're led to believe.
I'm sorry, your sound was cutting out.
Oh no! I mean, earlier you mentioned the French Revolution. I was just saying that in some ways It reminds me of that, because it wasn't completely what we're told it was, as far as of the origin behind
yes,
it.
But the difference is that we have a strong nationalist faction building this geopolitical bloc of Eastern European countries that would stand against the Western influence and mass migration and so on. And I really hope that they will succeed coming to power eventually, because that would give us the alliance of Poland and Ukraine and Hungary and these countries, the potential to stand up against the Western leftism and the destruction of our national identities. These are the nations that are able to create something that would be able to protect Europe.
Yes. So I mean, that's part of I know what you have been working toward and contributing to yourself. Correct? I mean, a lot of the countries neighboring Estonia and Estonia, having organizations like yours who are able to to merge together for a common cause, a common goal, right?
That's right. And also, what I've been seeing as one of the most important things, and my mission in that is there are different historical conflicts between these nations, like the Europeans and the Hungarians and Romanians and so on. And these are pointless conflicts that sometimes get in the way of nationalist cooperation, which is the most important thing, right? So to put that kind of conflicts aside, and I think we are making progress in that area, because there is growing cooperation between Polish and Ukrainian nationalists and Polish and Lithuanian nationalists, despite the historic.
And so, what are the primary countries that Estonia and your organization have been affiliated or working with so far?
Well, our closest allies are Latvians and Finns and Swedes, which are the closest countries to Estonia.
Okay.
And well, I've been in the last years traveling a lot in different nationalist events in different countries. We work together with Poles and Ukrainians, which is, I think, if we look again at this this idea of this Eastern European cooperation, then Poland, Hungary, and Ukraine are probably the most crucial nations, the strongest Eastern European countries that could work together and create something. So that's
certainly. So yeah, it seems like. So it seems like those in power that try to maintain a lot of these conflicts, maybe even manufacture some of the conflict. Otherwise, a lot of these nations could more easily coexist, each maintaining their national motives and just be able to focus on sustaining themselves.
That's what we have to achieve. National identity with a wider European identity. We have to work together in order to save the sum of all these different cultures in Europe. And with diversity of nations, because, well, the left is always talking about diversity, but what they are really creating is simple black and white global melting pot, consumer society. Everything is based on market choices.
Yeah, it's removing all diversity for the future.
Absolutely.
If you just look down the road. Wow, that's a great way to sum it up for people. Honestly, is to really focus on that sort of concept. I mean, it's so at odds with itself. Opposite what it claims. Yeah, that very, very enlightening perspective.
The point of nationalism, in the end, is retaining this global diversity, while globalism tries to destroy it. But to retain this diversity, we need borders between countries, and we need to limit migration, and we need to set up kind of protective measures for these nations, because otherwise there won't be any diversity.
Right. They need to maintain their independence, their freedoms, their wealth, and ultimately their culture can only be preserved through all of those being looked after.
Right.
It is very interesting for me to, to notice some of these differences, well, especially like when we were talking about Russia, because, well, I mean, yeah, it's curious how, I mean, being anti-globalist, I don't know, is something perhaps I may have to redefine. Like with Putin, he seemed to be against some things that globalism is trying to push on everyone. But he's clearly.
But so are China and North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that some imperial powers don't want to be part of global world ruled by America doesn't mean that they are on our side.
Right. So I mean, true nationalism is having as many sovereign, independent nations as may naturally evolve, basically.
Right.
Well,
That's also something important when we look at humanity's evolutionary perspective, because to achieve the most in the long run, we have to have as many possibilities as possible, and the variety of different nations, different views of the world, different cultures gives us this opportunity.
Yeah, appreciate how you point out the importance for us to look to the past. For in some of these times that are rather barren, culturally speaking, especially for a lot of European culture. But well, it's very interesting. I think the way you've phrased just your perspective on this. I was just thinking of one of the quotes you. I think it was a video I believe I caught of yours, but and you were talking about how we could be perceived, in the future, and just the sort of the sort of path we might leave for our descendants, basically. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we dropped. He dropped there. I'm gonna try to get him back. Looks like we're having some issues.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see. His thing says he's offline, so he needs to reboot his Skype. That's what he needs to do. Damn it! You got 30 minutes to go, dude.
Yeah. Or at least like 25.
I am not. I want you to go longer. I'm not ready. Jeez, I'm trying to eat here and what have you. Okay,
here he's
came back online. Yeah, I see it. Okay, hang on. All right. If anything, I want you to go over tonight a little bit. All right.
Okay.
All right. Oh, damn it. Okay. But he says he's online, so get him here. Jeez. The hard, if it doesn't bring him in, then the worst thing is I have to bring him in and then, drop you, bring him, then bring you back, play those silly games. But,
Okay.
or I have to drop the server. I could do that too. Drop the server, bring you back in, and bring the server back in. It's probably what I'm going to have to do. All right, let's do that. Make sure that you leave the conversation, because I think this is what we're going to have to do. Okay, so get ready. The recording won't be affected. Just stand by, okay?
All right, please stand by, listeners.
Okay, good.
All right, so you're back on. All right.
Might have been a problem
listen,
with my.
Richard, go ahead and take it over until I relieve you. Okay. Don't
All right.
stop.
Is it back?
Yeah, you're back on. I'm just telling you, don't stop until I relieve you. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that, Ruben. We lost the connection for a moment with you. Hi, listeners. Thank you for sticking around. Sorry about the technical difficulty there. Ruben, I'm sorry. Where did we leave off? I believe I was just discussing your references. I think to the legacy we could leave perhaps for our descendants.
Can you repeat what you said earlier?
Oh, just that I was just thinking about I don't know, just something that you had been mentioning in a previous speech you were giving, just talking about the well, I know you've mentioned here today even of us looking to the past for a lot of the answers, but I mean you also mentioned the what we could potentially leave for our descendants, the sort of and perhaps we won't be able to. Well, all we can do is, I mean, especially in these dark times, I mean, it's kind of hard to have inspiration for people, but you had some really inspiring ways of seeing just, the hope, of, with all this immigration and all these nations in turmoil. But, I don't know, just, I don't know, what would you say to the people?
Well, the idea of nationalism in such a time that we're living in is simply to keep up the link between our ancestors and our descendants. It's something that is necessary for all the future greatness that our descendants can build one day. And if we are right now fighting for the survival of our nations, of our culture, of our people, then we are holding this potential of our descendants. And it's that simple. It's something that is somewhere hidden within us, in our genes, in our myths that we have inherited from our ancestors and the ones that we create here today. We are passing them on to our descendants. And everything that our descendants will have, all the ideas and the tools they have for creating this new Europe, has to come from us. So this is our responsibility, and this is what we're really fighting for. It's not just some usual political issues about economy or foreign policy or so on. It's an existential thing. It's about the future of our people.
And you already see a larger pushback against all of this this politically correct propaganda, really, for all of the the multiculturalism and the immigration and just the double standards, even, for
Absolutely.
all these.
Absolutely, there's a huge pushback, and it's getting bigger with every year. It's well, I was very much surprised about both the Brexit and the Trump election happening, because I didn't think that the people in the West are so awoken yet to really stand up for themselves. But they're already doing that, and the next step from this is gonna be explicit nationalism.
Mhm.
We are going eventually to look for the same meaning that I was talking about earlier, the meaning for ourselves as a group, as a nation, and that brings us back to our roots, to our ancestors, to our myths, and that also provides us with the energy that we need to create something new, because that's what we eventually have to do. It's not just about keeping alive what we can, but it's about creating.
I know not just immigration, but any protests of government have also been heavily censored in the corporate media in Europe. But I know that there's been a lot of conflict going on in France. The native population has been, protesting and rioting for great lengths of time. I'm not sure I've heard too many updates recently. Where you are, have you heard much information at all about France there?
Well, I think the most important thing for France is going to be the presidential election in May of this year. So everything, every issue related to immigration and protests and so on are in some way connected to this election, which is again a chance for another country to show that they want to break away from this globalist system.
It would be a good example. I heard Marie Le Pen is campaigning on being very anti-globalist. She's saying that she'll single-handedly tear down all of globalism and or something to that effect. So
right. And what's a great thing is that I think she's most popular among the ethnically French young people, because this also shows that some some paradigm is shifting in a way. Well,
yes,
like 30 or 40 years ago, it was very simple that the older generations were more conservative, more right-wing, and the younger generations more left-wing. But this tide is also turning. And of course, if you look at the official statistics, then you won't see that because, again, in the French demographics, the I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but among the young people, I mean, half of them might be migrants by now. So if in the election day we're going to see results that one half of the French youth are voting for Le Pen, then it means that the French youth are totally on her side.
wow, yeah, no, that is great because the I mean all the universities try to propagate a far left sort of mentality for their campuses and for all of their students. So it is inspiring that in spite of all of that, we do have a lot of young people in a lot of countries that are still resisting and are able to appreciate a more nationalist, conservative view of things, which really goes more in line with nature in reality. I mean, the policies of the left, they fit political agendas, but they don't actually work.
Right, and they don't have anything new to offer anymore. They're just nervously looking for new oppressed minority groups who they can stand for, but it's becoming more of the same. The left is now becoming the force that is trying to keep the status quo. They're trying to retain the system that they have. And the force that is promising real change is the right-wing nationalists.
Yes, I mean in this past generation or two, the left fully gained power, and they don't want to let go. But the pendulum will have to shift. After being so extreme for so long, there's no other way things can go, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it is very inspiring, and regarding your country in particular, what sort of I don't know things. Well, I know the Independence Day event. It has been one thing that I think just shows how much more and more people. I mean, it seems like it's been growing exponentially. I mean, every year, going from hundreds to thousands in just a few years here. And
yeah, that's a great thing.
Yes, as far as the amounts that the EU forces on each country with these immigrants, I mean, has it been like, do you know, like, I don't know, is it relative to population or and the wealth as well, or? I mean, I guess it's already been for quite a few years now, even in your country.
It's relative to the population, yes. But it's what we're seeing now are only the initial quotas. And as long as there are countries who are agreeing to these quotas, the EU is going to be pushing for more and more. And I think that's the worst thing about these quotas, because in a normal situation, 500 migrants in a country of 1.2 million wouldn't be that much of a problem, but it creates a precedent that the EU can force upon us as many migrants as they want, and that's the worst thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's nothing that keeps the EU in check regarding any of these policies. I mean, I don't know if how much, like, perhaps the United Nations may be an influence at all or not, but I mean, regardless, it writes its own laws and just enforces it, and then of course it's backed up by the West in general, including the U.S. For any countries that would resist to the point of conflict.
Sure, but again, there isn't a real mechanism how they can force a country who really doesn't want to go along with their line, how they can force these things on that kind of country. We're seeing it in Hungary's or Poland's example, that Hungary just said, no, we don't want these migrants, and there was nothing the EU could do because the EU doesn't have an army. They don't have like a way to really force a nation to go along with their policies. It's mostly cultural and ideological influence that they have. And this is the thing that we have to break to be free from globalism. We have to break this cultural influence, which also means that the entire political class in these countries has to be replaced, because the current politicians who we have in most European countries are working from the fundamental idea that they have to serve the EU and they have to serve globalism. It's a thing of their mentality. They're like robots who have been developed to kind of do this job in each different country.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you said, I think that France would be a high-profile example. If they do leave the EU successfully, I hope that'll happen. I mean, a lot of people think that Germany won't stick around long, even because of financial strain alone. If that does happen, that would just be the chain reaction we need to get so many other countries out of it. I know that there's a lot of financial strain already. I know in the Mediterranean, right? Like Spain, Greece, Italy. I believe a lot of these countries have had revolts of their own as well already. Isn't that?
That's right. Yeah, and there are both right-wing and left-wing revolts against the EU in Southern Europe.
Okay.
But eventually, they all represent this growing discontent with the globalist ideology, both in economical and cultural sense.
And so as far as the the media is concerned, and like the people's perception where you live, as far as these conflicts, say with Russia, I mean, we're all given a very strong propaganda that Russia is more the aggressor than the West, than the U.S. And well, I'm just wondering, like, where you are. I don't know. Do most of the people, see the U.S. as the aggressor rather than Russia in a lot of these conflicts, like in Syria? I mean, for example.
Estonia is a different example in that way because we have a lot of historical conflicts with Russia. Like within the last 1,000 years of Estonian history, Estonia has been invaded by Russia 40 times, and we have a pretty big Russian minority in Estonia who the Russian government tries to use to extol their influence in Estonia. So in Estonia's example, Russia is also fighting against Estonian nationalism because, well, from Russia's perspective, they want Estonia to be a multicultural state for, both Estonians and Russians. Although most of Russians in Estonia are Soviet-time immigrants. So we don't see Russia as a friendly country, definitely. Now, in Middle Eastern conflicts, I think most of Estonians also see America as an aggressor there, because, well, again, it isn't so simple that you have to pick one of the two bad options.
Right.
And that's why it's extremely important to create something independently European, some European bloc that would stand for Europe and European peoples. And I think a lot of Estonians and a lot of people from Eastern Europe actually want to see something like that coming into existence.
So a block of various, well, primarily Eastern European, but European countries with similar nationalist, self-preserving goals in mind.
Right.
Excellent. Well, yes. No. I mean, I hope a lot of countries can sign on to this. Yeah, I know you've been. It sounds like you say you've networked in quite a few countries already. Well, you mentioned, let's see, your neighboring closest countries are Sweden, Finland, and
Latvia.
Okay, and then you mentioned Hungary and yeah,
Poland and Ukraine and so on.
Okay, so yeah, quite a few countries that you've already been networking in. Yeah, for anyone out there who might be listening who wants to connect with Ruuben, yeah, certainly, I'm sure he welcomes any sort of collaborations.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I don't know. We could have a few minutes left if there are any other points you'd like to make to the listeners. I have their attention here.
Well, yes. I think I'd like to emphasize once more how important it is to find again our roots in our past and in our history. Well, I believe for American listeners, it's a bit harder task than for Europeans, because your roots aren't so deep in the country where you live, looking at it historically. but it still doesn't mean that you should not be connected to your ancestors, because if we go back far enough in history, then Europe is the ancestral home for all of us, all European people and their descendants around the world. And you should try to look back in the history and try to imagine how your ancestors once lived, how they saw the world. What were their dreams? How could they have seen their descendants, us, living now? What would have been their ideas about our future, and what they gave us through history? Because all that we have, all our thoughts, our ideas, our language, our genes, are inherited from our ancestors. And now, if we change that perspective, and when we look at it from the side of our descendants, then again, they are just as far from us in time as our ancestors. But there is something similar connecting us with them, and through us connecting our ancestors and our children. And through this line, all our culture, all of our way of being in the world is passed on by each generation. And that is how all people used to live one day. This is something that gives meaning to existence in the world, as opposed to this global consumer society in which there are no roots, there isn't really anything that matters. But if you start looking back to your ancestors, if you start thinking about your descendants, then you see that there are really things in life and things in the world that do matter. And this gives your life a meaning. This shows what is your responsibility in the world. And this might be the most important thing in our lives.
And so, yeah, we can only we can only make the efforts that we can imagine, the hopes and dreams we can for the future and for those descendants, and see what can come of it. But if we don't even do that, then all hope would be lost.
That's right. Absolutely.
And so it seems like we would need a rebirth, Ruuben, in each nation state. When you mention the ethnos state, it seems like a concept where, these multicultural and immigration-based policies would be replaced with ones that are, strictly against things that go against preserving the native culture. So I mean, you can actually look into the long term and truly have local diversity throughout the planet when we look into the future.
Absolutely. That's the main issue here.
Yeah, so I think it's we can wrap it up if you want, Richard. And I just want to invite everybody to stay tuned for the next show. We're just going to play some music here before right after Richard wraps it up.
Okay, well, thank you once again. Thank you very much for coming on, Ruuben. And
thanks again for having me on.
And if anyone wants to contact you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, you can contact me through Facebook, through Twitter, or write me an email. It's Ruuben.Kaalep, RUUBEN.KAALEP @gmail.com.
All right. Well, as I said, we really appreciate your time and all of your insights. I hope you have a great evening and weekend, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
Thank you, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay, everyone. Well, that was, once again, Ruuben Kaalep, and you've been listening to Beyond the Matrix with Richard Kary. Stick around for the Stephen D. Kelly Show. And until next time, transcend the construct. Regards.